Hello, BookTube. I went to the Brattle today here in Boston. Those of you who are maybe new to the channel, uh, first of all, welcome. Don't forget to email me, st.donahue@gmail, about anything you want at any time, and feel free to send pictures as well. uh, but the Brattle Bookshop is a used bookstore in Boston that's just fantastic, just an amazing place. It's 3 stories. The first 2 floors are what you'd expect from an ordinary used bookstore, just much better stocked and with a much greater level of turnaround. So for instance, the huge mystery shelves or the huge fiction shelves, or the second floor is nonfiction, nature and history and religion and whatnot. Those shelves are not only well stocked and fairly priced, but they also turn over quite a bit, and that would be great enough. But the Brattle also has a sale cart, a lot next door that's covered in carts and shelves of sale books, not 1 or 2, but a whole floor's worth, a whole store's worth of sale books for $1, $3, and $5, and you never know what you're going to find out there. It's the stock is constantly overturning, and the owner of the store is one of the most energetic used book buyers left on the market, on the general market, non-collectibles. That's what the third floor inside is. The third floor inside the shop is collectible items. But the owner of the shop will buy anything. He will go anywhere with his van and his workers, and as a result, you never know what you're going to find in the sale lot of the Brattle Bookshop, which is where I do most of my shopping. I hardly buy anything inside. But I went today. I was starting to feel bad that I hadn't been in a long time. I used to go to the Brattle virtually every day, sometimes literally every day. There was a long time where I worked at a new bookstore right around the corner from the Brattle, so it was the natural thing to do to go there for lunch. So that's what I did. But even after that, I made a point of going often, several times a week. It's the turnover is that great that you can go several times a week and you won't be saying the same things. But I hadn't been in a while. I've grown kind of comfortable, kind of accustomed to just working on this couch. I have a large amount of work that I love to do, and I have wonderful company. So I've gotten comfortable doing that and haven't gone to the Brattle as often as I once did. I'd kind of like to make up for that. And see, what gems I can find. The whole challenge at the Brattle, for me, is to find books that are going in my permanent collection, as opposed to things that I'm just interested in at the moment. Although the Brattle's also good for those, because you're not hurting your finances any to take a chance on something that you've never heard of, or that you might only kind of sort of be interested in. If you pay $1 for it, what difference does it make? You can afford to risk it, and I don't know how many wonderful books and wonderful authors I have learned about through that kind of experimentation at the Brattle in the sale lot. So I went today, and I got a small pile of books. I wanted to show them to you, and they range all over creation in terms of kinds of books. The first one is a murder mystery. It's Darkness at Pemberley, and it is by T.H. White. This is a murder mystery written by the author of The Once and Future King. It's an academic murder. It's a Cambridge murder, and I haven't read it in eons. As soon as I saw it, I've never seen this paperback edition. I don't know if maybe VG Crime. This is a Golance paperback. Maybe this did not come out in America. Maybe this was not the American edition. But one way or another, it's been so long since I read this that I'm pretty sure I will get halfway through it before I even remember who done it. So that was worth it. That's one of those $1 gambles that I was talking about. Although most of these were $1. Just a fantastic haul for less than $10. The next one is by Iris Origo, an author who I generally like. She wrote a biography of the great poet Leopardi, whose poetry I really like and whose editions I watch feverishly for. And this is her book, The Last Attachment, which is the story of Lord Byron and Contessa Teresa Guiccioli. Guiccioli was young. She was 20, and Byron was a good 10 years her senior. And she was married to a man who was 20 years her senior or more. A horrible, brutish ogre of a guy. And this book is about uh, the Countess's love affair with Byron. They met, they hit it off right away, even though she was pregnant at the time. They became lovers a day after they met, even though she was pregnant at the time. And the author found a trove of letters that had been passed down in her family that are not just hers, but hers and his. And I read this book when it first came out. This would have been 1990 something or other. 2000. This came out in 2000. I read everything about Lord Byron, and he did not look like that when they met and fell in love. Just so you know, that's a very romanticized etching. But everybody who visited Byron when he was, when he was staying in Italy, and he spent a lot of time with her in Ravenna. Everybody that visited him was unanimous in that they barely recognized him and had no idea, would have had no idea, had they not known him, they would have had no idea how old he was. They would have assumed he was 10 or even 15 years older than he really was. But I remember, I read this when it first came out, and I remember liking it, and I remember thinking, that's a Byron book that you should have. You couldn't possibly have them all. Even I couldn't. I love Byron. I love his poetry. I love his life story. I love his letters. I love even a lot of the stuff that he brings out in other people. But if I were to make it a point of getting every Byron book, this my little book collection would be swamped with them completely. It's almost come close to being swamped with them in the past. So I'm choosy, is what I'm saying. And this one might not. I want to reread it for $1. I will gladly reread it, but it might not survive the cut. I might decide. I mean, I decided originally, 20 years ago, I decided that although I liked it, I didn't want to keep it. I'll try it again and see if maybe that holds up. I want to reread it anyway, and then if it doesn't make the cut, then off it will go. Then this next one is fantasy. It's Conan the Barbarian. This is from the 1970s. This is Conan and the Sorcerer by Andrew Offutt, who was a third-string fantasy author, a hack fantasy author who never passed up a brief that had money with it, and who's quite good. He's quite enjoyable. I have no idea how many things he's written. He wrote in his life. I don't know if he's still alive, and I have no idea how many books he wrote. Oh my God, was it a lot? He would sometimes hit his stride. Sometimes, he would have either more time or less time, depending on what made his work better. And he'd write a genuinely good book or even a genuinely good series of books. For instance, his series of fantasy novels on Cormac McCart are quite good. They're very enjoyable. Okay, that's largely passed. Somebody set their rug on fire or put explosives in a microwave. So we have about 14 minutes until the next time that happens. On the same street, within eyesight of the same apartment. I don't know how anybody in the next town over is still alive. I honestly don't. But anyway, this is a Conan novel from the 1970s. It's a trade paperback, and that was rare at the time. And the reason for it is because it's illustrated. It's lavishly illustrated. I mean, all throughout. Spot illustrations, big page illustrations, and really well done, too. This was a 1970s illustrator who I think went by one name. Yeah, Maroto. He went by Maroto. And I'm not 100% sure who that is. I think I once knew. But I remember reading this. I read this when it first came out and liked it a lot. I don't know where my copy went to. But I'm always in the mood for more Conan pastiche fiction. Always. More Conan pastiche fiction, more Conan, I reread the Conan stories all the time. But the foremost font of pastiche fiction for Conan the Barbarian is the comic books. And I just got that big omnibus of Savage Sword of Conan and plan to get others. So that's probably what whet my appetite for this. So I'll gladly reread this. Because with Darkness at Pemberley, this has been all these first three. It's been a long time since I read them, so who knows? Then this next one, I read this once when it first came out. This came out in 2015. It's by Wendy Ferry, and it is bookmarked "Reading My Way from Hollywood to Brooklyn." And it's a book about books, which I really love, and I remember liking this, but I don't have. The minute I saw it, I thought, oh, you need to reread that. It's not solid in your mind at all, which could be ominous. That could be a hint that maybe I ended up not liking it that much. But again, for $1, I'm willing to try it. I remember it being it's the author's story. It's the story of her upbringing with books and how they shaped her life and her personality. She was the daughter of a Hollywood gossip columnist, who was also F. Scott Fitzgerald's last lover. So she grew up in a family library that had been in large part chosen by F. Scott Fitzgerald, which not everybody can say. And that's sort of the slam bang start to the story. But she moves on from there to write about, how she saw herself in the characters of other books, how she saw her aspirations, things she wasn't but wanted to be. I remember it fairly well, but I want to give it another try. Absolutely. And then this next one, you see there's a run in the middle here of largely books about books, or close to it. Bookmarked is a book about books and reading, but it's with heavy elements of autobiography. Now, the same thing is true of these other two. This one is Enthusiasms by Bernard Levin, who was the Christopher Hitchens of his day, and who wrote about everything, just omnivorously. And newspaper editors, paid him good money for a general roving column, where he got to pick what the column was about. And a lot of times it was about books, and also movies and TV. He was a wonderful, gifted television critic. The type of person, his criticism is the type of criticism that you read it and you wish that the person were still working today. You wish that they just still had a crack at the new stuff coming out. And I don't think I've read this book at all. This is just a collection of his criticism. And it doesn't have a table of contents. Okay, well, this is just going to be about books and TV and movies and whatnot. So it's been a while since I read Levin at all of anything. So and then this next book is also a collection, and it is not just by a bookish person. It's by a book critic, and not just a book critic, but one of the greatest of all book critics, one of the princes of my profession. How I wish, I always say this, but how I wish that there were currently a big fat volume just consisting of his book reviews. That's all. Find a hungry, impoverished graduate student who knows the period and knows literature, or who is willing to research. Give them all of the reviews and tell them, here's your job. We're going to get a mucky muck. We're going to get a high-profile literary person to do the introduction to this book. What we want you to do, because that mucky muck will not, is go through these reviews, find out about the book under review, 9/10 of which will be out of print and forgotten, and write a little tight introduction, enough to give the reader of the review an idea of what the book was, who the author was, and what was at stake when the review came out. Do that, and we'll pay you $30,000. I wish there were a volume like that. As far as I know, there isn't. This is the closest that we come, and this is not nearly everything. This is Cyril Connolly, and this is The Evening Colonnade. And this is just a horribly fatuous cover, but because that's an illustration and he's sitting in a studio. But this has a ton of writing on literature and on literary persons, including tons and tons of literary people that he knew. It doesn't have everything. It doesn't have some of his really great literary essays, and also a lot of his reviews are not in here. The editors of The Evening Colonnade obviously went the way that the editors of most collected book reviews go, where they sift through for the names that have survived and assemble the reviews accordingly. And I understand that from an economic point of view, but I always want to say, you're not reading it, you shouldn't be reading these things to find out retroactively what Cyril Connolly's verdict on, I don't even know, Ernest Hemingway was. You should be reading it for him, for his voice, which means that that reviews about books that have long since vanished under the waves are every bit as interesting as the ones about people who have stayed famous. I would love to see that. This book, if I remember correctly, I had a copy of this once. If I remember correctly, yes, okay. This one does the standard thing where it at least tells you in a footnote what the book is that's under review. A lot of times it has to do that because a lot of book reviewers they break one of Steve's book reviewing rules, and they don't tell you what the book is in the body of their book review. They just assume that's the header material. But the review is going to get separated from the header material. Guaranteed, especially if it gets collected. So really what you ought to do, and besides, it's only good writing to include it in the review. You're supposed to tell your reader what you're talking about, which starts with telling your reader what you're talking about. But a lot of people, a lot of book reviewers, especially the hoity-toity kind, like to think of their book reviews as literary essays that just happen to be occasioned by the fact that you're having a check for 75 quid waved in front of your nose for a certain book that you know perfectly well is third-rate and destined for the remainder pile. But no, you have to poise your piece as though it were an essay, as though Professor Blankenship's biography of Lloyd Toynbee just happened to be on your mind. But anyway, Connolly is a dream. He's a wonder to read, and this is a big collection. And I was thinking about it. I haven't exhaustively checked here, but I don't think I have any other Cyril Connolly. Every time I get a copy of Enemies of Promise, his much lauded and much hated book, I end up giving it away. I end up sending it to somebody. And there is a collection out there somewhere that is more... This has all sorts of essays in it. But there's a collection of his out there that's more specifically geared to criticism that I don't have a copy of. As far as I know, every time I get that, I send it away as well. But I don't see it as often. I'm perfectly happy to take this. This is 400 pages of Cyril Connolly. That is just fine. And then the last book was a delight. It made me smile from ear to ear, even though I already have a copy. But the copy I have is a trade paperback that is not particularly well made. The binding is not good enough really to survive another vigorous reread, and the cover is that cheap paper that tends to curl if it's exposed to the air too often. So if I took the book and put it on a nightstand, it would devolve like some creature in a science fiction movie. So I was glad to find a hardcover. This is Dear Genius, the letters of Ursula Nordstrom, this is a collection by Leonard Marcus. She was forever and ever the children's book director of Harper's, and in that position found a whole bunch of industry standard names. People have gone on to become classics, and even the people who haven't, all of her writers came under her arm, her mother hen wing. She was an outsized personality, a wonderful judge of character, a wonderful judge of literature, and she would never put it this way, but a real champion of not condescending to children. And as a result, her track record on children's classics speaks for itself. And she was also, as was incumbent in the day, a really peppy correspondent. Once upon a time, we wrote letters, and it was a large chunk of your day was keeping your correspondence going. It wasn't, hope this email finds you well, best, so and so. It was a correspondence. It's hard for me to describe it if you're too young to remember. It's hard for me to describe what snail mail correspondence was like if you're too young to remember it. But it was very different from email correspondence. It felt like a living thing. In multi-voices, you would change your voice from letter to letter. And there were more events. Even business correspondence was. I remember what it was like. Boy, oh boy, when you got into that, when that became a part of your life, we worked it down to a science. You had to. So you had your correspondence paper, maybe different papers for different recipients. You had I had the box on the desk with the envelopes in it, a roll of stamps. I had an address book, and in the address book I would jot down stuff that I needed to know, like where you're going to college, name of your kid, that sort of thing. Things that in the friendly course of correspondence you have told me, but you wouldn't have all of the correspondence with this person right at your fingertips. So, I kept little reminders like that. And it was just a block of time every day where you did letters, where you did your letters. If you read Victorian novels, you will see the characters often sit at their desk for a whole morning to do letters. That's what it was. That's what it was like. And you then waited. Then you would do... I myself did my letters the night before, so they could go out first thing, the first mail in the morning. And then in the afternoon, a barrage of letters would come to me, and that required doing letters again. It was tremendous. It's gone, and I couldn't actually legitimately ask for it back. because there was a lot of inefficiency and a lot of delay. Email is instantaneous and spontaneous in a way that the most we could do, the closest we could approximate it would be postcards. But Elizabeth Nordstrom was very good at letters, and her letters, her collected letters, are a rare collected letter volume that is actually worth reading. Same thing is true of Byron. So I was happy to find this in hardcover. I will just replace the paperback that's on my shelf. And there you go. That was my trip to the Brattle. This was Dear Genius, the letters of Elizabeth Nordstrom, who was such a forceful personality that in her lifetime, people, friends, and enemies referred to her as Elizabeth Maelstrom. Then Cyril Connolly, An Evening Colonnade, which is all about, it's just a ton of collections of his stuff, travel writing, literature writing, profiles of enemies, profiles of friends, that sort of thing. Then we have Enthusiasms by Bernard Levin, Bookmarked by Wendy Ferry. We have Conan and the Sorcerer by Andrew Offutt, a heavily illustrated fantasy novel. We have The Last Attachment by Iris Origo. And lastly, we have Darkness at Pemberley, a murder mystery novel by T.H. White. And that was my Brattle trip for today. I'm kind of thinking about going back to the Brattle again this week. The only problem will be weather. Because I know this is going to sound kind of shallow, but I like shopping in the outside carts of the Brattle. I like the sale lot. You know, I get 10 books in the mail every day here, so it wouldn't make much sense for me to go into the shop and pay full price, $6 to $10 for a book a piece, when I can just get an armful of stuff that's interesting for $1 a piece outside. And the sale lot is not covered. It's not weatherized in any way. And it's looking to me like Wednesday and Thursday of this week in Boston is going to have the chance of strong pop-up thunderstorms and downpours. And, of course, the Brattle, they don't want to lose that whole stock at a shot. So if the morning weather report tells them that there's a strong chance of rain, they just tarp everything over and leave it that way. And nothing quite matches the bitterness of going to the Brattle, getting all enthused, rounding the corner and seeing that the outside carts are tarped over. And that's Wednesday and Thursday. There's a strong chance of thunderstorms and downpours for both those days. And then, if the information that I'm looking at is correct, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in Boston is a genuine heat wave, the first one of the year. Temperature tomorrow is supposed to soar, but then rain will bring everything back down. But then the weekend is supposed to be very hot and very humid. So we shall see. We shall see. I might not feel like doing that. I probably wouldn't mind too much, but then there's also the worry of leaving Frida behind here in an apartment that's slowly getting hotter and hotter and hotter. The key would be, I guess, not to be gone too long. I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out closer to the day. I'm not going to go anywhere tomorrow, I don't think. Tomorrow is supposed to have the highest chance of raucous weather. So anyway, that was a fun trip to the Brattle. I was very happy to do it. It was, I was a little bit trying to leave Frida behind. She doesn't like going on the subway, and she wouldn't leave anybody alone if we were in the Brattle lot together. So I had to leave her, and that was a little bit trying, but it wasn't anything traumatic for her. She just slept. And so I really should get over it. Anyway, if I do go back, of course, I will share the bounty with you. Thank you, BookTube.